Most founders think that getting ghosted means the buyer decided no. So they replay the conversation, they find what went wrong, they fix it, and walk into the next conversation more prepared. But guess what? It happens again. Because the buyer who ghosted you didn't decide no. In most cases, they couldn't find a way to decide yes. And those two things look identical from the outside, but they have completely different causes, hence require different solutions. Until you understand which one you're actually dealing with, the ghosting will keep happening again and again, regardless of how good the pitch gets. When a founder gets ghosted, they almost always do the same thing. They replay the conversation, they find something they didn't have, a feature they didn't have, a price that was too high, something they said, they fix it, they get into the next conversation, and then it happens again. Now, I'm not saying that these things are all useless. They're not. I'm just saying that applying the wrong solution to a problem won't fix it. Now, I want you to think like a buyer for a second with me. Analyze the situation from the buyer side. They got on a call with you, they're genuinely interested, and they left considering it, but when they sat with it alone, without you being there answering questions, something shifted. Not a decision against you, something more specific than that. At some point after that conversation, the buyer tried to imagine saying yes, and when they ran that forward, when they pictured themselves having made that decision in the future, something in that picture didn't feel solid enough. Maybe it was uncertainty about whether this would work or not. Maybe it was about the conversation they'd have to have with their team to justify it. Maybe it was something wrong with the timing, the exposure, the risk. But whatever it was, it made the yes feel unstable. And here's the part that produces the silence. Saying that out loud is genuinely uncomfortable. It requires admitting that they were seriously considering it. It requires being uncertain in front of someone who is clearly certain, so they don't say it. They mean to reply, they intend to think about it more, but the longer the wait, the more the silence becomes its own answer, even though they haven't actually made a decision. The ghosting isn't a decision, it's what happens when a buyer couldn't find a solid ground to say yes. They couldn't tell you that without a conversation they weren't ready to have. They didn't choose silence, they just kept not choosing anything else until silence chose them. But here's what makes it genuinely hard to solve. The buyer will almost never tell you what made the yes feel unstable. Not because they're hiding it deliberately, but because most of the cases they can't articulate it themselves. So the question becomes, how do you surface something even the buyer cannot identify it in their own mind? This is where most advices about ghosting goes wrong. Founders are consistently told to follow up more, to add urgency, to sweeten the offer, to check in casually so it doesn't feel like pressure. All of that is trying to push the buyer toward a yes that they haven't been able to construct yet. And it doesn't work because it's solving the wrong problem. The buyer doesn't need more information about your product. They already have enough information to be interested, and that's why they engaged in the first place. But what they need instead is a way to make the yes feel stable and solid, and that's a completely different problem. Think about what makes a decision feel solid versus unstable. It's not usually about having more facts about the product. It's about being able to see clearly what happens next, what the commitment actually involves, what would the path look like if it works out, and what would the exposure look like if it doesn't. When a buyer is able to see that clearly, a decision is possible. And when they can't, the easiest thing is to wait for the clarity to arrive on its own, and it rarely does. And waiting becomes silence, which leads to ghosting. The founder sees it as rejection, and the buyer experiences as paralysis. And neither of them ever has the conversation that would have resolved this. Ghosting isn't two people deciding against each other. It's two people waiting for a conversation that neither of them knows how to start. The fix isn't a follow-up tactic. It's a shift in your thinking about what your job is during the conversation.